Hello everybody, my name is Adeolu Koforade, and for my presentation I will be talking about the evolution of sleep. Okay, so the research question I want to pose is, to what extent is our ancestors and people of hunter-gatherer societies getting better sleep than us a myth in present day? And what role does technology specifically play in unpacking this myth? I want to pose this question because before I took this class, I did more research on the question, and I believe our sleep was actually worse than our ancestors and people of hunter gatherer societies. A specific reason for my stance on this was because of the use of technology. Many of us are sleep deprived or know of sleep deprived people, and most of this concern leads back to technology. Instead of getting the crucial hours we needed to be productive, we spend time watching TV, movies, on social media, etc. A lot of the times, people even wake up in the middle of the night due to their phones ringing from notifications they receive. This knowledge caused me to believe our ancestors slept better. It wasn't specifically until Roger Eckert's interview that we will look at later that changed my mind. It is important to note that people of hunter-gatherer societies as well as our ancestors faced their own troubles of sleep, which led them to be sleep deprived. The notion that they slept as soon as the sun went down and woke up when it came up is false. This presentation will further unpack this discussion while also acknowledging why this myth is difficult to understand. So how did our ancestors sleep? Their sleep was much different, and they were exposed to a lot more natural interruptions of sleep than we face today. For instance, people of a few centuries ago didn't have their own rooms and often found themselves sleeping with family members or even strangers. In a class reading, Benjamin Reese states virtually nothing about our standard model of sleep existed as we know it 2 centuries ago. For starters, the notion of sleep in a private bedroom out of the view of strangers or even most family members turns out to have shallow roots. People didn't have their own rooms and would often be woken up by their crying babies. Roger Eckert also says during the 1700s there were frequent illness, inclement weather, noise and mental strain, not to mention bed bugs, fleas, and lice. This gives insight of the sleeping conditions the people of previous centuries faced. It is important to note that these elements of sleep were still relevant today. However, there are better ways through industrial revolution and innovation of technology that combats against them.
It's absolutely incorrect to think that the more you sleep, the healthier you're going to be.
The study reported today in the journal Current Biology says we in the industrialized world sleep as much as our ancestors did.
There's been speculation that humans basically used to sleep when it got dark, which would mean they'd sleep, 10, 11, even 12 hours. But it turns out that's not the case. These groups sleep 5, 6, 7 hours. None of them average over 8 hours of sleep.
Just like us, when the sun sets, these people do not go right to sleep.
There's a thin yellow line here that indicates the light level, and you can see also that they remain awake.
In fact, regardless of what time they go to bed, all three groups on different parts of the planet wake up exactly when one very specific thing happens. And no, it's not the sunrise.
They're sleeping as the temperature falls, and they seem to quite consistently wake up at the lowest point of temperature in the day. So when the temperature stops falling, that's when they wake up. There's been a lot of emphasis on light and the effect.
As you can see, Jerry Siegel challenges the notion that people in hunter-gatherer societies get a full 8 hours of sleep and they operate based on natural illumination. More research done by the University of Toronto on Hadza people says after monitoring their sleep patterns over 20 days and nights, they found that they were only 18 minutes when all 33 tribe members were asleep at the same time. There were at least 8 people on average that remained awake through the night at any given time. This was because people had to stay awake to fight off any predators wanting to attack them during the night. The researcher also says that younger Hadza people were often called owls since they stayed up during their procreation years. So, how do we sleep today? Sleep today is very different than it was in the past. According to the Healthline, most people are monophasic sleepers, which is a sleeping pattern that involves only one segment of sleep. This is usually during the night. It is thought that sleeping for one 6 to 8 hour segment per day may have been shaped by the modern industrial workday. Most people have their own beds and their kids in separate rooms. It is important to note that some people are biphasic sleepers, which means they sleep in two segments. The Healthline says people might actively pursue biphasic sleep lifestyles because they believe it makes them more productive. It creates more time for certain tasks and activities during the day while maintaining the same benefits monophasic sleeping at night gets. Biphasic sleep can also consist of sleeping during the night and taking naps during the day, which is usually after work or school. Innovation is something that has deprived us from sleep for many years now. This innovation goes as far back as the Industrial Revolution. This is not the same natural illumination that our ancestors faced, but artificial illumination that we have created today. Things like the lights in our rooms, street lights, lights from our phones, and the TV, these all affect sleep in a way. According to the Sleep Foundation, when lights enter our eyes, it is sensed by a special group of cells on the retina, which is carried to the brain and interpreted as information about the time of day. The brain then sends out signals throughout the body to control organs and other systems in accordance to what time of the day it is. Technological devices can be either interactive or passive. Passive technology are things that don't need much input from users, like listening to music and watching TV. Active technology are things like playing video games and being on social media. According to the Sleep and Health Foundation, studies have tested the effects of bright tablets and laptop screens for up to 5 hours before bed. It seems that natural evening rise in melatonin is not affected by 1 hour of bright lights, but instead 1.5 hours. Thus, after 1.5 hours of technological use in the evening, people start feeling less sleepy. They also do better at mental performance tests, and brainwaves suggest increased alertness. This means you consistently go to bed later and sleep in longer. This can be a real problem when you need to get up at a set time in the morning for school or work.
Is it fair to conclude that our ancestors, therefore, actually slept better than we do?
Our ancestors, let me emphasize, did not sleep better than we do. In fact, never arguably has our sleep been better than it is today, despite the vast amounts of money that we spend on mattresses and other bedding, and as well as drugs to subsidize the pharmaceutical industry. Uh, for any number of reasons, we're immune to the environmental annoyances that kept people up and about.
As you can see from this interview, Roger Eckhart explains that the disparities and inconveniences of sleep were much worse for our ancestors. They had to deal with things like disease, bugs, noise, all things that are combated against with our innovations today. These problems we're faced today are worrying, but they are mostly self inflicted than anything else. So, my final thoughts on this whole situation is a lot of the things that cause sleep deprivation in today's world are self inflicted. Yes, there are people like students who have schedules that lead them to get less sleep in general, but a lot of the times it's due to self procrastination. People choose to stay on their phones or watch movies despite their busy schedules. I know people that have to go on social media or watch something before bed, regardless of what time it is. This is in contrast to our ancestors because they had no choice whether they were going to be attacked by predators or not, or whether they got diseases from sleeping outside. Their poor bedding and influx of bugs like lice and fleas was things they had no control over. Therefore, I stand with my claim that our ancestors sleeping better than us is a myth, and we did sleep better. What do you guys think? Let me know.